Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to another installment of Flyera Gonna Flyera, episode number 76. We got a real good one for you this week. We talked about it last week. This Flyers season was pretty much on the line this week out in California. They needed an impressive road trip, and holy fuck did they deliver. Win, win, win. They were California cruising, ladies and gentlemen, as is the name of this episode. 3-0 sweep out in Cali. We'll go over the 3 games that they played, go into the whole 9 yards of it. Few extra Flyers talk in the news when it comes to some of the trades that may or may not have surfaced at the trade deadline. And if this marinates into the summer, we'll go over that as well. We're going to be talking about the playoff push as a collective whole, because the Flyers are suddenly just 4 points out of a playoff spot with the game in hand. Yes, they have 3 teams to jump, but the way they're playing, anything's possible, as Kevin Garnett would say. We'll go over that, maybe a few extra final thoughts, and then go into next week's games, because they got 3 more massive games from now to Saturday. As always, I am joined by one of my 2 gracious co-hosts. You know him, you love him, Mr. Eric Martino. Eric, how you doing today, bud?
Oh, I'm doing pretty well. I guess I'm doing just as good as the Flyers. I don't know, man. Like, this team will not die. It's like, holy shit, man.
We must have ruled them out at least 3 or 4 times. Like, oh, they're not making playoffs. Let's play for the pick. They said,
after watching what we watched in January and and a bit of February before the Olympic break, and like even just how they closed out December, like basically that kind of like more or less like a month and a half stretch where like they looked like dog shit, and it's like then now all of a sudden since the Olympic break we're like, no, you know what? I think we want to make a run now. It's like, okay, let's go, let's do it. Okay.
You ever see the Michael Jordan meme where he just lays back on his chair from The Last Dance and he goes, and I took that personal. That was the Flyers. From every one of us that fucking talk shit about them, they took that personal. And you know, listen, It's a team that won't die. I got to give them that. There's still, listen, don't get me wrong, there's still shit that they do that drives me crazy, and I'll hammer on that eventually. But right now, you're 9-2-1 in your last 12 since the Olympic break ended or something like that. They've been on a run. You got to give them their props. Outside of that Rangers game, there really hasn't been a wet fart in there that they've played since the Olympic break. They've been excellent. So they deserve their props where it's due. But let's go into these 3 games this week. Eric, let me start with you. What did you think of the week prior?
Yeah, this California swing there, not great. What can I say? Like 3-0. Honestly, like awesome, great stuff there. The Anaheim game, man, we came out swinging. Like I thought they came out with like a lot of pace. They really controlling the game and everything. And then we took the lead. The one thing I've always, we've said it before, and one of the big things I don't like about Tocchet is once we have the lead, he likes to go in like a prevent defense, rolling like Couturier, Glendening, whatever, try and protect the lead and like take it to overtime or not take it to overtime, but like try and protect the lead as much as possible. They don't push the pace as much. And that's it. That's why, third period, actually, I find it starting the second, like a bit at the end of the second, the third period, like you let them back in. And with a team like Anaheim that has that kind of firepower, you can't just sit on your heels and like let them come at you, and like you gotta match pace. And that's what I thought they were doing at the beginning of the game. Then second half of the game, I thought they sat back, let Anaheim back in. Now look, we ended up winning the game in overtime. Like awesome. So that was great. We ended up with the win, so awesome. I thought the fourth line, I'm kind of maybe contradicting myself right now, but like I actually thought the fourth line actually did have a good game though. Like I'll give them that. Like
Luke Glendening of all people.
Like
even besides the goal, he had a good game.
He had chances. So you know what? Like again, I don't like the style. I don't like the concept behind it. But at the end of the day, they did play well. They were playing well. So whatever. I thought in that game, just a little bit like I thought Mishkov had a bit of a rough game against Anaheim.
Oh, I agree with that. That was one of his worst games, I think, of the year. Even though we got an apple at the end of the game,
Yeah.
That was definitely one of his worst games, at least since the Olympic break. No argument there. He struggled.
Yeah. So anyway, so then like against LA, like this is what I like. Now again, I don't know if this is because now again, like Katori was injured, like Van Denning was injured, so we didn't have those guys that game, or even against San Jose. But like the difference, this is why like I'm like, okay, did Tocchet like say, okay, fuck it? Because against LA, again, we had the lead. But instead of like I found instead of going into like a prevent defense and like trying to close out the game, like he was putting like Zegras out there, he was putting Mish out there, he was putting Tippett out there. He's like at one point, like he had Mish on Zegras' line, and so he was really trying to push the pace. Now, again, they still ended up tying the game. It still went into fucking overtime and then finally won a shootout. But at least, like I prefer if we're gonna let them back in, I'd rather we let them back in that way. You know, and it's like these kids, like these young players, they have to learn how to like play in these type of situations. Like they need to find out. They need to know if they make a mistake, that's fine. You want to make a mistake, that's fine. But I want you to learn from that mistake, you know, and like then like build upon that. Because if they're not put in those positions, how are they supposed to adapt? How are they supposed to learn? So I have to give Tocchet credit there. Great. The San Jose game, I found like whatever. I found it was kind of a boring game. And I think I kind of called it. I
genuinely enjoyed that game. That game was exciting to me, to be honest.
The San Jose game?
Well, I'm watching. I'll get into it when it's my turn to talk, but I thought the second half of that game especially had me nervous. Like,
okay,
it was one of those games like I'm getting nervous, but it was like a little bit of an
I'll give
excitement. It's like because they're kind of hanging on because the fatigue was definitely kicking in. Playing a third game in 4 nights, but I thought it was a little more exciting compared to. There's been other Tocchet games that have made me want to pull my hair out that they were fucking slugfest. I did not feel like that was one of them, me personally. But sorry for interrupting. Continue, Eric.
No, like what? But like, look, yes, I'll give it to you. Like, I thought the first half of that game was kind of like slow, boring. Like,
I agree.
Like whatever. Anyway, the second half, like it was a bit more exciting. But I thought it was a bit more exciting just because, like, okay, like now San Jose's coming at us. It's like, oh fuck, you know. So it's like, but whatever. Look, at the end of the day, we won the game. We ended up sweeping all 3 games. That was great. Couple like little negatives. Just again, the fucking power play. Like it's weird because there's some spots where it actually looks good in a way. Like like maybe they're building on something, and then it's like it goes away. I don't know, but they were 1 for 9 on this trip. Like, no, sorry, 1 for 11. Excuse me, 5, 4, 1 for 11 on this trip. And just to put this though, like a little bit of perspective, since the Olympic break, okay, I was calculating this morning. Since the Olympic break, they are 4. So that means he's only scored 4 times in 13 games. Okay, 4 for 41. That's like barely. That's not. It's 9.7%. Something like that. So like, let's round it up to 10. Let's.
You know what's crazy? You know what's crazy? That's not even the worst power play over that time span in the NHL. There's 2 teams that are worse. I saw a statistic on this. I think it's Calgary and St. Louis that are both even worse than that in that frame. That's the craziest thing.
Yeah, but like, okay, St. Louis, okay, they got some players, but Calgary was just shipping guys out. Like, and they're like, okay, but 10%? Are you fucking serious?
That's an excuse.
10%? That's nuts. And same thing, like on the PK, we did allow one power play goal each of those games. So, and we took not quite a few penalties, but we did take 12 penalties, and we actually took 4 penalties each game. So I don't know. Like, look, positives and negatives take away from those 3 games from this week, but no, it was a solid week.
I gotta agree. Like there was listen, it wasn't a perfect week in terms of how they executed. There's some stuff I will be critical of, but I'll give them their props. Like it was a resilient week, as I think is the best way to describe this. Like we'll start off with the Anaheim game. They came, as you mentioned at the beginning, yes, they came out guns a-blazing right out the gate. The fourth line as a collective whole, they looked very good. Luke Glendening, of all people, had some spark. He got the first goal. He had, I think, two other chances, one where he hit the post, another one that was like a clusterfuck shot early in the third period. Mind you, I will say I fell asleep a little bit in the second because that game was at 10 p.m. and I woke up in the third. And it was 1-0 when I fell asleep. I woke up 2-1. So I kind of had to look back at the second period and some of the play in that. But in the third period, as you mentioned, Eric, they played that Rick Tocchet, Dave Hackstall-esque prevent defense, hang on for dear life. I don't want to hear fatigue at that point because at that point you had not played since Saturday. That is, you had 3 straight days off at that point. You can't use that card. You're just playing to hang on for dear life. They played at 12-6, so I can't give them that argument. I bring this up because the last 2 games I had to go into an 11-7 because of some injuries. But you played 12 forwards, 6 defensemen in that game, so you can't use that excuse. And they just played into a style where it's like, let's just hang on to this 2-1 lead, play the Claude Julien, Dave Hackstall, Rick Tocchet-esque defensive prevent, hang on for dear life, make sure they don't score, defense over offense. As you mentioned, Eric, you can't do that. You've got to start pushing the narrative of trying to have a little more of an aggressive output to put the puck in the net. Because if you do that, you're enlisting confidence in the opposition. B, you're completely giving up the momentum perspective just to play a little more defensively sound. And C, you're putting an extra wear and tear in your goaltending. Especially in a 3 games and 4-night situation. Yes, I get it. The next game, you weren't going to play Vladar anyway. But still, stuff like that carries over, at least in the perspective of momentum. Now, they allowed the last goal. Michkov had a rotten game. I will definitely admit that. He did get an assist at the end. It was kind of a fumbling assist because he had a chance to score. The puck kind of slid behind the net. Noah Cates threw it off the goaltender's foot and went in. Don't know how, but it went in. Flyers ended up winning that game 3-2 in the extra session after allowing the goal in the final 2 minutes. Cutter scored. Yay.
Yeah, fuck.
I will say for a Ducks Flyers game, that game wasn't quite as lethal as the games we've seen in the past. I think this was mainly because it was in Anaheim. The games in Philly, I felt like have been a lot more bloodlust. But this game, I think with the fact that we're in the midst of a giant playoff hunt, mind you, but that didn't stop Buffalo and Tampa from nearly killing each other a week ago. But the fact that you're in a bit of a playoff hunt, you're kind of putting that into over perspective. But anyway, then the injuries start to happen. Sean Couturier and Deborah Barkey get ruled out. You're forced to go into 11-7. And as you mentioned, they had to play a little more of an aggressive output in the Kings game. But I think a lot of that just had to do with the lineup that they had. They had no Couturier. You're going 11-7. Andre's even running some time in forward on the fourth line.
Center. It's like center.
Quite interesting. I did not have Emile Andre being a fourth line forward on my bingo card, but here we are. But they were playing a little bit more of an aggressive output. Meech's ice time was up. Zegras' ice time was up, but I think it was more that they were forced to play these guys a little bit more. Going back to that game, just looking at the ice time as a collective whole, I'm pulling it up right now. Like you look at some of the ice time leaders. Michkov got 17 minutes, mind you, went to a shootout. It was mainly Dvorak, Cates, Tippett, Michkov, Zegras, and Konechny getting the majority of the ice time. Even Carl Gunstrom getting 15 minutes for whatever reason. But I think that was mainly because he was stuck on the Cates and Michkov line. So just being on the third line by default and playing with them, you're going to get your ice time up a little bit. But it was mainly 6 forwards getting the big bulk of ice time. So while I was happy to see that, he was playing his better players and playing a little more of an aggressive output, they needed to. Mind you, they still only had 20 shots, but besides the point, they had to play a little more of an aggressive output in terms of ice time. At the same time, you still got the lower guys, you got to give them a little bit more so you're not wanting these guys into the ground. I shouldn't see Christian Dvorak getting almost 23 minutes of ice time. That's a bit excessive. I shouldn't see Owen Tippett, as great as he's been playing, I shouldn't see him at 21. I should see him about 18, 19. Spread that out a little bit. Cates, 20 and a half minutes, maybe again, 18 and a half for him. Spread that out. You don't want to run these guys into the ground. The third game, now, mind you, Flyers did what they had to do. They got the win. Again, I liked that second period. They looked good. Michkov, going back to him real quick, played one of his better games of the year. His puck facilitating plays were all over the place. They looked good. I thought Sanheim had a great game there, too. He put in the third goal. He was locked down defensively. That was one of Travis Sanheim's best games of the year, too. Owen Tippett continues to be on an absolute tear. No question about it, in my opinion. He's been the hottest Flyer over the last month. And I think he's up to now, 24 goals on the year? He's got, if he can keep this up, he might finally push 30. His career high is 28. He needs 5 to break that in the last 13 games. The way he's playing, I don't see why he can't do that. He's been on a fucking tear. And he's using his speed. He's using his body. The second half of that statement, especially something that we have emphasized for a while, he's not making the boneheaded decisions. He's playing smarter. Yes, he's not putting up the point production that his hype is getting. He's still only in the 50-something point range pace. But at least from a hockey smarts perspective and the way he's playing, he's making a big impact. And that's good. Hopefully he can continue that throughout the year. But again, give props where it's due. Owen Tippett is playing some good hockey right now. And Noah Cates, too. Me and you talked about this off air. You said, I thought it was 11 points in 12. He's got 12 points his last 13 games.
Yeah.
Very quietly, too. But he has been very good. He's been, without a doubt, their best center over the last few weeks. No question about it. He's earned the props. He's low-key on pace for 45 points, I think. He could push 50 if he keeps this run. So good on Noah Cates. Hopefully he can continue that. He's getting a lot of ice time, and he's had a fluctuation of players on his line. Michkov's been the only real consistent. Brink got traded. Forster got hurt. Now he's playing with Gunstrom. He's had time when he got hurt. It's been a rotation of wingers that he's played with. So good on Noah Cates. He deserves that. His defensive game continues to be good, and now he's putting up in an offensive perspective. So props to him. Then we go to the third game, the San Jose game. As me and you just talked about, first half of the game was a little lethargic. Second half, the excitement picked up a little bit. Tippett again, using his speed. Snipes one. He could have had 3 that game. He was all over the ice. This felt like a light version of that Washington game 2 weeks ago. He was making plays. He was using his speed. He had another breakaway that he tried going 5-hole that was just barely stopped. He could have easily scored there. He had another 1 or 2 good opportunities that I mentioned. Continues to be a major impact, but they went up 2-1. They finally scored a power play goal. Props to Garnett Hathaway, by the way. He lays a hit on Celebrini, draws a penalty off of a good, clean hit. Flyers get a power play, and I said this on Twitter after the fact. It didn't end up happening, but in my opinion, if the Flyers scored on that power play and win that game, I would have gave the match to Garnett Hathaway for forcing that penalty, getting them the opportunity. They did score on the power play as Christian Dvorak buries a one-timer from Travis Konechny. Flyers go up 2-1. They hang on for dear life. They pot 2 empty netters, win the game 4-1. Good on them. One thing I do want to mention that was a little concerning, I looked at the ice time of that game when I was just seeing what Michkov played that game. Christian Dvorak had 25 and a half minutes of ice time. I'm glad he's playing guys more, but that's too much, especially in the third time in 4 games. I love Dvorak had a good game, but again, 25 and a half minutes for Christian Dvorak, that's excessive, man. That's too much. Konechny had 23 and a half minutes again. That's more of a 20-minute guy, in my opinion. That's a bit much now. Talking either is the extreme of one or the other. Either doesn't give enough or gives way too much. Christian Dvorak should not be seeing 25 and a half minutes of ice time in any game that ends in regulation. Any game that goes to overtime in a regular season game. That's too much. But, good. The team is whole. I'm not going to give talking too much shit right now because the team played gritty and bad part this week. So I'll give them their props. 3-0. Yeah, Vladar again continues to be sensational. 2 great games. Little shout out to Sam Ersson too. He's been playing a lot better since the break ended too. Doesn't change my opinion. Still think he needs to go at the end of the year. but good on him to potentially raise his value somewhere. They maybe get another chance next season elsewhere. But I don't change my opinion. He's gone at the end of the year. Unless if this team makes a massive playoff run, which is not happening, Sam Emerson, just use this opportunity to try to bolster your own value for next season wherever you end up, because I still don't believe it should be here. And we have been joined by Mr. Jamey Bascow. Jamey, how you doing today, bud?
Hey, aloha mahalo. Doing pretty well. Sorry, the kids went to Bible school for a little bit there after church, so got held up a little bit. But that's okay. It's always good to see the Flyers doing well and, have a little Flyers conversation here.
Yeah, well, while we're on the topic, why don't you give us a quick recap of the week, and then we'll move on to our next topic. What'd you think of the week, Jamey?
Yeah, so I came in the middle of something there, and at the end, you know what? I can't really get on Rick Tocchet in terms of the usage. Only time on ice usage, regardless if it's less or more, only because they were missing Sean Couturier and Carl Lundstrom, injuries and stuff. They can't rely on Emil Andre, so he had to go with it. Veterans, that he could lean on, not necessarily the youth. But so especially to me, it just shows a weakness down the middle. Like they didn't even elect to call up, Jakob Gaucher, from the Phantoms, and the Phantoms are on fire right now. So I understand why they're a bit hesitant. But maybe they don't have no faith in anyone, down the lineup, there with Glendening, and stuff like that. And maybe that's why they went after Luke Glendening and, got him from waivers, on trade deadline day. It just shows, to me, what it shows is that there is a lack of depth down the middle for this organization, even more than what we first thought. Like, they don't even reach the Lehigh and say, hey, let's go plug in a guy, you know what I mean, just to call him up to have a body. It's that bad within the organization because they could. It wouldn't even count against their call-ups of the 4 at the trade deadline because it's for emergency purposes due to injury. So all that stuff goes out the window. It's just there's no one there for them to grab. Or, that's what that showed me the past 2 games. It's like, wow, not even necessarily the past 2, but against the Sharks, it's like, wow, there is really no one down the middle that they even hesitate to say, yes, bring me up. So that's a glaring need. And we already knew that they needed a 1C/2C, but they need more. They just need more quality prospects down the middle, and they just don't have it. What I would have done, I would have kept Massimo Rizzo for this very reason, just because so maybe struggled at the ECHL, struggled at the AHL. Sometimes guys, when they go up to the next level, it just all sinks in. We've seen that happen to certain players. That's why I would have kept Massimo Rizzo for that matter, just for this very reason, and allowed him to make his NHL debut, maybe against the Sharks. But, that's not a Tocchet issue. That's more or less, a front office issue there. That's not a Rick Tocchet just did what he had to survive with the players, with the roster that he had. He's not the one that's making these decisions in terms of who is on his roster and who's not when it's game time day. Now, post game time, maybe, but on game day, he doesn't say, hey, I need this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy. He doesn't have a say like that. That's a Danny Keith Jones issue. That's not a Rick Tocchet issue. So really, I'm going to be honest, I don't really have anything to blame with Rick Tocchet this week. I thought he coached very well, this week, given to the grand scheme of things. And on a very tough West Coast trip that, they never exceed at. They never excel out west on this trip. And they swept for the second time in franchise history. That's actually pretty remarkable. Kudos to Michkov. I don't know if this was already said by you and Eric. I know you probably said he hit the 100-point plateau, that mark.
I actually didn't.
But I wanted to say he became the 4th fastest Flyer in history to reach totals. And it's even more impressive because he is the first one out of the 2023 draft class that didn't play in his first year in the NHL to reach that pinnacle there. So kudos to Michkov for, hitting the 100-point, game, hitting 100 points in only 148 games played. Even with the season he's had, he hit the 100-point mark for his career. That's pretty darn impressive. In my eyes. Kudos to Owen Tippett, who just continues to play consistently up and down the lineup, wherever he is, whatever Tocchet puts him at, whether it's the penalty kill, power play, or whatever. He's doing what he's supposed to. He's playing very well. Kudos to the defense. Kudos to Dan Vladar. Kudos to Sam Merson. Like you said, I heard you mention Sam Merson. He does deserve some praise here. Although I'm with you, Alex, with that. My thoughts don't waver on what they should do next season. Yeah. My thoughts don't waver, in terms of bringing or not, Sam Merson back. I would like to go another route. My thoughts also don't waver on trying to, clear more wing spots, for one of, Porter Martone or even Jet Luchenko for that matter. I think that this organization is starving depth down the middle, that you obviously see Luchenko as a center, whether it's a third or fourth line center, for him to play if he makes the team next year. That he could actually make the team out of camp, both Porter Martone and Jet Luchenko, due to the lack of depth down the middle for the Flyers. That's pretty crazy that I could see both on this team next year. Yeah. That's something that I didn't see possibly a month ago. I thought it'd be one of Porter or Jet. Now I actually see both possibly making it in a weird way. So that's pretty crazy. But, kudos to the Flyers overall. Kudos to them. Unbelievable job.
Yeah. You made some very good points, Jamey. I think Martone's going to be here regardless, personally, no matter what, because he's too high of a talent to just keep him in the AHL right away. But Luchenko, yeah, there is a possibility he could be pushing for a roster spot. And I should have came out. Maybe I could have rephrased what I said a little bit differently about Tocchet, because I don't want to give him too much crap this week, because the team played very well. He got dealt a tough hand the last two games, especially having to run the 11-7 lineup. Yeah, it was just more of an observation that I looked at, but like 25 and a half minutes. That was a lot.
No, I get it. Yep.
Yeah. Yep. But anyway.
No, you're right. You never want to see a veteran like that of Christian Dvorak playing 25 and a half minutes. Yeah. Honestly, I'd much rather see a younger player. It's just unfortunate that they don't have, it just shocks me. It's mind-boggling that they didn't call anybody up.
Yeah, they ran with what they had. Maybe you're right. Could have something to do with the Phantoms. I don't want to mess with the little mojo they got right now. But anything else to add, gentlemen, before we move on to the next point?
I will. Eric, you're wearing a great hat again.
Thank you, Jamey. Well, just a couple of things.
Eric is the hat man. He comes out. It's not the same hat. Can never get on Eric for his attire, man. I'll tell you, you're the hat guy.
I got rid of a lot of hats, like especially from my youth, but now I'm trying to restart my collection again. So yeah, it's bad. And man, hats have gotten so fucking expensive. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But anyway, no, but just honestly, just quick, a couple points. Like I said before, right? The Flyers in the last 13 games, basically since the Olympic break, have 4 power play goals. Okay, the team as a whole has 4 power play goals.
Yeah.
Okay. Tyson Forrester, before he got hurt, had 3 in 21 games.
Wow.
I just had to say that. And
know that.
Just also quickly, because something I know, the past 3 games on this trip, Mishkov he took 3 minor penalties. Yeah. A lot of people were on, have been on him all year. Y'all gotta stop with the penalty.
Yeah, he took 2 against Anaheim, didn't he? Another reason why a rough game there.
I know he didn't have any against San Jose, but I can't remember if it was 2 against Anaheim, 1 against LA, or vice versa. But
it was one of the 2.
But something interesting that I saw, okay, between January 21st, okay, against Utah, to March 14th against Columbus, he only took 2 minor penalties. That's 18 games. In 18 games, he only took 2 minor penalties. So just now, it's back, he's taking 3 in the last 3 games. So it's let's clean that up a bit. But he's been getting better with penalties.
You know who else has been taking penalties a bit more? Trevor Zegras. He's been getting in the box a lot lately too. And I've noticed he has a bit of a temper. He'll do something a little reckless at times. I think he took 3 on this trip too, if I remember correctly. It was at least 2, but I think it was 3.
But there was a couple that were really weird calls. But even that one on Zegras, I think it was the last game where he gets tripped up, and as he falls, he trips up the player in front. Like,
Yeah,
the fuck you want him to do? Like, what do you want him to do? Like, and even one of the ones that Mishkov took, like, okay, he swung his, like, again, you shouldn't be doing a lazy stick penalty, but you're like, there was some calls that the refs could have made, even like against, I forget who it was, I think it was LA or something, and you're like, how do you not call that? But then you call this like swing that Mishkov takes and just like nudges the guy, and you're like, you're gonna call that, but then whatever. But still, it's a penalty. It's a stick penalty, and you know whatever. You got to control your stick, man. Just whatever.
All right, gentlemen. With that being said, let's move on to our next topic. So there was a lot of talk this week about some of the trades that did not surface. One name that came up that really interested me, and I was speaking to, I think one of our listeners in the comments section about this last week. Patrick Laine was mentioned as a potential name for the Flyers, and I found that very interesting. Patrick Lazon, 7019, mentioned it on our YouTube channel as a comment. Stated that that's a name that would be interesting before it was even mentioned.
Good. You can have him. I give him to you.
Well, listen. So it's a thing of apparently it was part of a potential bigger trade. I don't know what the specifics are, but he was mentioned with us in Toronto. And I looked at this, and at first glance, I'm like, why would they want to go after Laine? They've got a surplus of wingers. There's no room for the guy. Laine is kind of a one-trick pony. What's the point of going after Laine? But then as I sat down and tried to think about this one, I'm like, all right, what's the reason behind it? Well, there's one thing Laine can do. Score power play goals. Something this team can't freaking do. Eric, you mentioned it yourself. They're 4 for 41 over the last, 13 games?
Yeah.
A big mess. They have the talent to do it, but they just can't seem to score power play goals. So let's start with him. Would you be open to adding Patrick Laine despite the giant cesspool they have of wingers? Eric, let me start with you on this one.
Well, if you're asking, would I be interested like in the off season to bring in Patrick Laine? No.
That's what I mean. Yeah.
No. There's no point. There's no point. No. The only I read that too, and I saw that, and like the only thing that came to mind, and actually more that I read on it, like, and it made perfect sense to me. It was a cap dump. Like Montreal had, there was all those rumors. Montreal had a deal in place, or Montreal was working on a big trade or whatever.
Yeah,
it had to be a cap dump, and that's why I think like Philly and both Toronto were mentioned, is because we have the cap. Like Toronto was getting rid of guys, so they had money open up, and we have money, and we didn't add anybody, so it's like, okay, Montreal, like give us this, and we'll take Laine, And at the end of the day, it's like win-win, because maybe we would have got like an asset in return. What it would have been like a second, a third round pick, fourth round pick, whatever. And at the same time, then you see, like, oh, could he actually maybe help the power play? Like, I don't know. But then, like, if we would have even acquired him, then I asked myself, I'm like, well, okay, hold on. If we would have acquired him, I'm like, do we call Alex Bump up then at that point?
Yeah.
So I'm like, well, do I want Patrick Laine taking Bump's spot, or would I rather have Bump play like the last 20-something games of the season? I think, you know what? I think I'd rather have Bump. But then again, then you look at it the other way. You're like, well, if Patrick Laine plays and he helps the power play, and that helps us get to the playoffs.
Yeah.
But look, at the end of the day, it didn't happen, and like I said, I don't think they were going to give up any assets for him. I think it was a pure cap dump. We would have got something in return, if anything. Yeah. So, but but this offseason, no, I'm not interested in Laine.
Can I give a quick opinion, just quick before Jamey, because I know Jamey's
go for it.
The problem with Laine, if you sign him in the offseason, is where do you play him?
Yeah, exactly.
5-on-5
to begin with. Yeah,
he's not good at 5-on-5. You have to play him in your top 6. So if you have room in your top 6, and he's still going to hinder you a little bit, because at 5-on-5 he's almost useless. I mean, that's my opinion.
Well, I would honestly, if it was up to me, and let's just say for argument's sake, they did bring him along, he'd be right on the third line. That's where he's going. He's not going into the top 9, top 6 to me. He's going. That's where I would put him personally. He's a third line winger. One of the things that is interesting about that, he is a left winger. The Flyers got about 8 billion right wingers, is what it really comes down to. So the thing is, if we didn't have the cesspool we did at wing, I could potentially see the argument for it, especially with the fact that this power play sucks. For that trade to happen, though, you have to move out minimum of 2 wingers.
Yeah.
And that's a challenge in and of itself. Do you move Tippett and Barkey? Do you move Bump and Barkey? Do you move Tippett and Bump? Do you mention Forcer? All those guys, if you ask me who I rather have on the team right now, I'm taking all of them over Line. But one thing Line can do is score in the power play, as we mentioned. I had, 15 last year, I think, for you guys?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah,
so 15, a hell of a lot more than any Flyer has had. But at the same time, is it worth it where he does fucking nothing anywhere else? No, so I do think the negatives outweigh the positives. I can semi-see the argument, but I'd be like 80% no, 20% on if you can move the wingers. Maybe I'd take a 1-year Flyer on the guy. No pun intended.
Well, there's a rental only. He would have been a rental only. That he would have helped you there. That's it, though.
They would do that, though.
Anyway, that's my opinion. I'm gonna
Jamey, your thoughts?
There's a few reasons why the Flyers could have been involved with the Line A deal. One, what we've seen in the past is Danny Briere has brokered deals, received draft picks in return. So if there was a trade involving, this is a vague rumor. This is why I really don't get into stuff like that. Although it may very well be true, but this is why I don't get involved into the trade talks and stuff like that unless I get like really solid information, because they could be used. The Flyers could retain one more salary. They have Kevin Hayes and Cam Atkinson's salary in term, or Scott Lawton's in terms of retainment there. So you're able to retain 3 salaries. The Flyers could broker the deal to maybe move Line A on temporarily to Toronto. That could have been a possibility. And then they would have received a 3rd, 4th, or 5th round pick. Danny Briere, I think, did that with Vegas on last year. Was it last year's trade deadline or the prior trade deadline? One of those trade deadlines, Danny Briere brokered a deal. They retained some salary. And then at the end of the year, the salary retainment, falls off in the Flyers. Kevin Hayes, Scott Lawton's, and what would have been Line A's would all fall off, and then they could retain 3 more salaries starting next season. That could be that was one possibility for the Flyers to be involved for Line A. The other possibility is what Alex just mentioned. They need help down, at the penalty, at the power play position. They just have been brutal at power play. And yes, it may not actually be the coaches anymore. Maybe they've tried changing coach after coach. When do we ever hold this organization accountable in terms of the players, down, at that realm? Not saying it is, but not saying it isn't. I mean, when are the players ever held accountable for their power play success? They just, I think the mixing and matching may not be there. To me, I do Zegras, Mitchkov, and TK and just let it go and have the 4-1 again. But like maybe that could be a possibility with Line A coming in. He's a power play specialist. Maybe they just want to use him at the power play position. For that to work, for the Flyers to obtain Patrick Line, that meant that the Flyers were definitely moving Nick Delorier, which they did. Carl Grundstrom was definitely thrown out there. We already knew that, right? But another person, Garnet Hathaway, would have to go. So in next season, to start this, if they wanted to be involved for Patrick Line, they'd have to get rid of Garnet Hathaway. Hathaway is absolutely gone. Somehow Hathaway has to go because, like you both mentioned, they are absolutely loaded at the wing position. Maybe not necessarily at the left wing position, but definitely on the right side. You have to move one of these players out of here or 2. For Patrick Line, for the Flyers to be involved for Patrick Line, Garnet Hathaway is the X factor. He's got to go. Or Carl Grundstrom. Both. Somebody has to go. Grebeck's going to be here next year. That's a given. He's a young player. He's played very well. Grebeck, is going to stay. They're going to have Porter Martone, who's going to make the team. Jet Luchenko probably will make the team. If not at the wing position, definitely down the middle like they first thought. Just because they have no one else to put down the middle. You know what I mean? So I can see Jet Luchenko and Porter Marteau making the team. So that leaves Garnett Hathaway, Carl Grunstrom, possibly Owen Tippett, maybe if he wants to waive his NMLC, his movement clause there. One or two have to go in order to pick up Patrick Garnett.
Yeah. I agree in that. Like, at the end of the day, the math doesn't make sense unless if you move guys. Now, if you make the room, you can maybe talk me into a short-term deal. I'm not doing anything longer than a year. That's a 1-year rental. Show us your work type of deal. I could consider it. But again, the room has to be made. That's where it really comes down to. Any final thoughts? We move on to the next trade rumor that has been out there.
Nope.
Yeah.
All right.
Not helping out Montreal in any way, shape, or form. They stole. So forget that.
Yeah.
Jamey said, "Fuck you, Rick."
Yeah, we say back, "Fuck you, we got Caulfield."
You really got to rub that one in. He's been great. I can't even argue. He might push 50 this year. All right.
Imagine him and Tippett together.
Oh my God! One can snipe and one has ridiculous speed. It's like
that's what I'm saying.
Terrifying. All right, let's move on to our next topic. So now Ristolainen was also mentioned quite a bit in a few terms. So one rumor was mentioned that the Ottawa Senators kicked tires on Rasmus Ristolainen. Nothing really materialized, but that was one team that was surprisingly mentioned. There was also rumors that the Flyers had a potential deal in place to move Ristolainen and another roster player for a roster defenseman and a prospect to a team. The team thought about it, but they said no. If I had to guess, I'm guessing the team was Detroit because they were kind of between Falk and Ristolainen. They inevitably chose Falk. And then I also heard the Bruins potentially about a Ristolainen and Tippett combination trade with maybe involving Patras Lorai and maybe another piece or maybe something with Letourneau. I still can't say his fucking name. Letourneau. I'll say it and then I'll forget the next week. Letourneau. But at the end of the day, a lot of Ristolainen smoke was brought up this week.
Yes.
And another thing that DeMarco mentioned, a lot of this is mainly with Anthony DeMarco. He also mentioned that they're going to explore it again in the summer, but they also don't mind keeping him on the roster and potentially kicking the can down next trade deadline where they kind of have no choice but to do it. Unless if they're in a really high position to contend. So, boys, let me get your opinion. Jamey, I'll start with you this time. What is your opinion on all this Ristolainen talk? Where do you think things go from here?
Yeah, I definitely. It's that's what it is. It's just talk. It's not that deals are imminent. I mean, Danny Briere, made it out. Flyers fans were like, "Oh man, Danny didn't." No, he talked to many GMs. He probably talked to all the other 31 general managers about Rasmus Ristolainen. It doesn't mean a deal was imminent. That's what I was trying to say. Before weeks in advance, before the trade deadline was even near, is that you're going to hear a rumor here, a rumor here, a rumor here, a rumor here. You know why? The team wants it out there. They use the media as scapegoats. Hey, get his name out there. It's garner interest because then you have teams put up against each other. And then the other general managers are like, oh, man, Risto's almost gone. Here we go. And now you got a bidding war for Risto. That's what Danny Briere was doing. Rightfully so. That means he's a good general manager. That's what I see. But there's no doubt that the Senators would be involved. When do the Senators make a push? They always use the late end of the season to make their push, and that's what they're doing. They're on a heater right now. They're on a 7-game winning streak or something like that.
Everyone in the East is on a heater right now.
It's Ottawa every single year. This is how they made the playoffs last year. Same thing. They just went on that tear. Same thing that the Columbus Blue Jackets are doing is what Ottawa does every single year for whatever reason. They always make that last push. And it's always with Claude Giroux. He did that here with Philly. Made that, with Myth, or something of that nature. So, no, of course Ottawa would be in. Of course the Bruins would be in. But what I want to say about the Bruins, now you mentioned Owen Tippett. This could possibly be a play for the offseason. Like I've said before, sometimes trades take 2 to 3 years to develop there, to manifest, really manifest. Not saying they're not working at it, but they're working here, and then they got something else to handle here. So they divvy out, and forget the Risto for a month or two. Then they circle back, and then it all comes full circle in the offseason. When you're talking about $12 million worth of cap space there, combined with Owen Tippett and Rasmussen.
Yeah.
There's a lot of money there. Typically, those type of trades happen in the offseason, so that's possible to explore. Maybe they were laying groundwork for a trade to be laid in the offseason. So, yeah, absolutely Boston would be involved, and other teams as well. The other 31 teams, definitely probably kick tires on Rasmus Ristolainen. He was good. He was healthy. He had a great Olympics. It was out there, that he was healthy at that time. I got a little worried with Tocchet when he said, he's day-to-day. That scared me a bit, and I was like, oh, God, that's the worst timing. It was 3 days before the trade deadline. He was like, oh, yeah, he's a game-time decision. I'm like, that's not what a GM wants to hear, that he's a game-time decision for a guy that had trouble staying healthy before the trade deadline, even manifested. So I was like, oh, man, Tocchet's really trying to keep him in Philadelphia. That's what I was like. So, but yeah, I mean, teams are going to be interested. They're not going to give up on trading Rasmus. He could be moved maybe in the offseason. When we're talking about 12, 13, 14, $15 million worth of cap, more than likely that's not going to happen at the trade deadline, and that's an offseason type deal.
Yeah, I agree there. Eric, how about you? What's your take on all this?
Yeah, no, but look, what it tells me is basically that there is interest in Ristolainen. That there are multiple teams that actually are interested in Ristolainen. And like I said, also last episode, I'm like, at the deadline, you're really only dealing with maybe 3 or 4 teams that have serious interest, and if that, in the guy, because it's teams that are either fighting are cup contenders or are looking to make a push, But in the offseason, you're open to 31 other teams. Everybody starts at 0. So maybe a team, I don't know, Team X that, wasn't in the sweepstakes in March, in early March. Well, you know what? Come June, July, they're like, well, you know what we're kind of missing is a Ristolainen, So, and so look, I think, he does have value. Injuries, I get it. Yes, injuries are a big concern, and that's why, maybe would it have been better to maybe take whatever package you could have got for him at the deadline? Maybe, but at the same time, again, I've always said, you don't want to trade somebody just to trade them. You don't want to diminish your asset. Oh, you're gonna only give me a 2nd-round pick. Okay, well, I'm scared he's gonna get hurt, so I'll take it. No, that's not how you do business. I'm sorry, that's not how you do business. So, look, come this off season, we'll see what happens, and will he be moved? Probably. Last week I said I expect him to be moved, and I thought if they don't move in the off season, it's a failure. I said that last week. I'll be honest. I was this week I was rethinking it, and I was actually you mentioned DeMarco, and I think I was on ONB. I think on Isaiah's pod, and he mentioned something, and I go, look, it makes sense because look, if ever, okay, if the Flyers do, let's say, make a move at center, and they bring in one center, who knows, maybe even 2 centers, depending what happens, if you actually make your offense that much better, and Risto's still there, he wasn't involved in any of those trades, and there's no other options on defense out there that really makes sense for you.
Okay, please. Let me work now.
So would it actually maybe be in your best interest to keep Ristolainen at that point? Because you're okay, yes, you have Bonk and you have Juracek technically on the right side, because Julesen's gone. Julesen, ciao, buddy, you're done. Thank you for your service.
Off to the gulag.
That's it. I'm sorry. So now, I'm assuming, because he's not waiver eligible, is that Juracek would probably take his spot on the 3rd pair as the right defenseman on the 3rd pair. Makes sense, right? Fine. And another thing that DeMarco actually said is that when he was talking to people from Minnesota, and because everyone's like, oh well, how good can he be if he's been in like the AHL the whole time and blah 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 and whatever. He talked to people from Minnesota, and he's like, listen, well, our top 4 is set, and we want to go with a more veteran bottom pair. So there really wasn't a spot for Juracek in the top 6, and you don't want to make him play. You don't want to keep him as a 7th defenseman and like just sitting in the press box. And they said that basically he's NHL ready. It's just that we didn't have a spot for him on our defense.
Yeah.
So there. So now, what's your other option? Bonk? Like, look, I've always been of the thought process of I'd rather have my prospects play like 1 or 2 too many games in the AHL than not enough. I want you, when you come up, you have to be ready. I want you ready. I don't want you to like come up and then flounder. So is Bonk is next season, like, look, he got hurt the first half of the season. And so you want him to come up and play in your top 4 right away next season? Like, what if he's not ready? Then what? You know what I mean? So look, again, if the this is my position with Bristol. If the Flyers do address their center position and they make like they make some addition, or like Martin comes and whatever, and you can't do anything else on the defense to bring in like a legit top 4 guy, then I'm okay with keeping Ristolainen and seeing how it goes. You know what? At that point, I think I'm fine. I'm like, you know what? It's not the end of the world if we keep Bristol.
Mm-hmm.
But if, and again, it shouldn't be, but if this offseason is a bit, well, you know what, there's no centers available, no one wanted to trade a center, blah, 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 and then you go into the season with more or less the same team that you have now, then I'll be pissed. Then I'll be like, well, then at that point, then trade Risto. I'm sorry, then trade Risto. Like, then there's no point in keeping him. If you're going to improve your team, and then you can sell me on the fact that, look, we improved our team, so we need him. Mm-hmm. Fine. I'll accept that. But if you don't really improve your team and he's still here, then I'll have a problem.
That's valid. I think that's a very valid breakdown. Realistically, it depends the course they take on the offseason outside of Ristolainen, whether or not you want to. Okay. I think that's a fair argument to make. So me personally, I think where there's smoke, there's fire. And the fact that this was mentioned a lot tells me I think there is a better chance than not. A defenseman needs to be moved one way or another this offseason. If it's not Risto, Juleson's gone. I don't count him. Yeah. Because he's not a regular. If it's not so you have 6 regulars. Sanheim, Drysdale, York, Ristolainen, Sealer, Andre. So you're not moving Sanheim and Drysdale. You cross those 2 off. York, I'm not saying it's likely he moves, but if there's the right trade, I'm open to exploring it. I'll say there's about an 80-85% chance York is back next year, but he's not as much of a lock as the other 2 I mentioned. So so just for argument's sake, let's say York is here. Leaves 3 options: Neil Andre, Nick Sealer, Rasmus Ristolainen. If Risto is to stay, I'm going to piggyback off of what you said. I agree they got to make a move at center to improve this team and push that argument you mentioned, yes. But I still feel the need of moving a defenseman. Even if it's not Risto, and you can move Risto maybe at the deadline or something like that, because I've already said they're not keeping him past next year. So something has to be done at the deadline to get some level of asset management. Unless if you're a true contender next year, which is extremely unlikely, and they have to move him at the deadline. If you're like what you were in 23-24, you got to do the Sean Walker route with him. You've got it. You can't go into the offseason keeping him and not getting anything, and then he walks. Because, as I've expressed, they already said their plan is to let him go after next offseason anyway. So with that being said, if you go the route of keeping him this summer, they have to move one of Sealer or Andre then. For the sheer fact that I still believe they need to find a true opening for a guy like Juracek or Bonk to push for a roster spot. And DeMarco, again, going to piggyback of one of the things he mentioned. He said that a GM mentioned that a right side of the future of Drysdale, Bonk, and Juracek, it's a young, pretty strong right side. But you got to give one of them an opportunity to push for a spot. And I don't see the path without moving a defenseman, because they would likely prioritize all 6 of the guys I mentioned before that. But then we can go with the argument, oh, what if neither of them are ready? That's fine. You find another guy like a Juleson to be a temporary fill-in until you think one of those guys are ready. You've got to find, as a number 6 at least. But the point being is you have to find a way to give one of those 2 guys a true path next year. Maybe even both, but at least one. Because I don't want there to be a logjam where a Juracek, who was a former number 6 overall pick, and he's looked good in Lehigh Valley.
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned, I don't know what it's been since, but there was a point he had 6 points in 5 games. Yes, we know what we've said about his skating. His skating is an issue. He can improve that. And he looks like a legitimate power play quarterback with a real shot, especially with another offseason of development, especially here with this team to develop. But if there's no path, you're just going to be starting in the AHL again. And you only can do so much in the AHL. One person mentioned something to me that was interesting, and I don't know how legit I feel this is, but they said Juracek is too good for the AHL, not good enough for the NHL. I don't believe half of that. I believe he is too good for the AHL in terms of how good of an offensive game he has as a defenseman. You're seeing the sparks. He looks more motivated here because he feels like there's a real path to be a full-time NHLer here. He was the guy I personally wanted in 2022. Obviously, they drafted the more talented guy before he went the way of the dodo, but that's besides the point. Juracek's here now. And if there's an opportunity for him to really prove himself, I just want him to get the opportunity. Same with Bonk. I think Bonk could be a little bit lesser of a degree. Maybe he gets another year to marinate. We'll see. He was 1 year after, so you can talk me into him maybe getting one more year in the AHL before him coming up. As we've mentioned many times before, defensemen take longer to develop in the NHL. Took Andre a while. I think he was, 23, 24, became a final full-time NHLer. So you can make that argument more at Bonk and give him another year, maybe a later season call-up. Cool, I can hear that. But I want to see Juracek at least have the real path to get here. He was a 2022 draft pick. Next year will be the 26-27 season. He needs at least a true opportunity to play here next year. And I think more likely than not, he has a real chance of making this team. I expect his skating to improve somewhat. I'm not expecting him to have the skating abilities of Elaine Hudson or anything like that, or a Cale Makar, but I expect his skating to at least improve a little bit, enough to the point that we can at least look at him as an NHLer. So with that being said, I agree with you in the extent that they need to find ways to improve the team where Ristolainen needs to be here. But at the same time, someone does need to move. Someone needs to move. If it's not Risto, another defenseman needs to move. And if Risto's not going to be back here next year, and unless if you're a true contender, which is unlikely, he needs to move at the deadline because you need to make your plans for the future. And that's where I come at with that. Anything else before I move on to the final roster thing that we were going to talk about? This one's going to be a smaller one.
Well, no, well, just quick, like you said, one guy has to move, and at the end of the day, look, Juracek has to play in the NHL next year. I think he's not waiver exempt, so he's gonna be in the NHL lineup next year. Most probably starting on the third. Like I said, if you keep Bristol, he most probably starts on the third pair, and probably with a Nick Seeler.
Yeah.
Because you know what, I guess Seeler would kind of be like a mentor, I guess, to Juracek too, more of a defenseman playing with Juracek to clean up some of his mistakes, if ever. So for me, that spells look, it sounds like maybe Andre might be that odd man out, unless you keep Andre as your 7 and you rotate him and Seeler or him and Juracek. So it's the third pair is a rotation of those 3. That could be a possibility also. And like I said, with Bonk, Bonk and Ristolainen's contract, the end of this, not end at the same time, but at least if you give Bonk an extra year in the AHL, it lines up with Ristolainen, and then Ristolainen's a UFA, or you trade him at the deadline, and then Bonk, at least you'll know at that point, okay, is Bonk ready to come up? What do you think? Like you talk to the guys down in the AHL, like, is he ready? Do you think, whatever? So if we get rid of Riston at this point, could he come in and step in, So look, like I said, I think there's options, basically. There's options.
Yeah. All right. With that being said, let's move on to the final thing I wanted to talk about before we move on to us talking about the playoff push a little bit. Sean Couturier. His name came up a little bit on Snow the Goalie. And I was a little surprised that apparently that a buyout may actually be considered with him. I don't know how much I agree with it because it's such a massive dead cap hit. But what is your take on that,
Eric? I just don't see a point in buying him out. Like, honestly, that the cap hit is going to be like, I would rather keep him as my 4C and for at least 1 to 2 more seasons. And then if you want to buy him out, then fine. But to buy him out now, it's like, what do you even save? I think it's like $500,000. I think
it's a little over $1 million, I believe.
Is
roughly
it?
$1 million.
I don't know, but whatever. And look, where the cap is going right now, like in the next couple of years, the projections and everything, like, yeah, he's way overpaid. Don't get me wrong. Like $7 million for a 4C is nuts.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, well, I'd rather have him that, like, worst case scenario, like if you have an injury at center, that you can maybe plug him as a 3C at least. Like, he'll give you that defensive
temporarily.
Exactly. So is it though? I don't know. I think buying him out makes no sense. I think that the dead money is going to be way too long and way too much for nothing. So I don't know. I don't see any point in buying him out. Not now.
I don't know if I'd want to buy him out right now either. I would prefer to go the eat half trade route because I think you can talk a team into maybe convincing him that he's a $4 million 4C. I do think that's possible. He still is great in the dot. He's still, he's good in the dot. He's not great anymore, but he's good in the dot.
He's still good, yeah.
Yeah. He's still a decent PK guy. But from an offensive talent, he gives you nothing. He's a 4C. Next year, to be honest with you, I have a weird feeling he'll be lucky to get 20 points. That's where he's going to be at next year. But I think a team like the LA Kings, I've said it before, makes sense for a guy like him. Anze Kopitar is retiring this offseason. They could potentially use a veteran leader down the middle who plays a good two-way game. Familiarity with Scott Lawton now, just another factor to throw in there. Kuzmenko is there, another factor to throw in, a few former Flyers. So I do wonder if maybe a team like the Kings would be interested in him at that. And the Kings have some cap space, so that could be a team that you could talk this into. Now, mind you, he has an NMC, so it would be tough.
Yeah,
Danny's going to have to work some magic to make him waive. But if you can talk him into waiving that deal, I think a trade for him being worth $3.875 million is a little more realistic on another team, and you eat less than a $4 million cap hit versus and maybe even get a small asset back, maybe like a 4th or 5th round pick. I'm not expecting much, but you get a small asset back for him. And instead of eating him as a $7 million, almost a 7, it'd be like $6.8 million cap hit for nothing. So that's where I'd go with Coots. I think if you are considering a buyout, I got to agree, at least 1 more year, maybe 2, but probably closer to 1. I would hope the trade route would be more realistic. Anything else to add, Eric, before we move on to our final points? Final topic, and then we'll move on to next week's games.
Yeah, just to give you the exact numbers, I just checked now on Puckpedia. If they were to buy him out, so it would be over 8 years. That you have dead money over 8 years. The first next season, basically you're saving about $1.1 million, and then the next 3 after that, you're really only saving like $1 million. because it'd be like, that's it. Next year will be at 6.52. And then after that, it's 6.77, 6.77, 6.77. And then it's a 520,000 for the 4 years after that.
Yeah, that's what.
So like the 520, who cares? But man, you're still paying roughly 6.7 million for the next 4 years for a guy not to play for you.
Yeah.
So
It would be like having Hayes and Lawton and TDA's dead and Atkinson's dead hits all over again.
It's that, you know what? Like I said, look, you buy him out now. It's like, man, you know what? For maybe next season, the season after, maybe it's not such a big deal because you're like, well, okay, we don't really need that money right now. But like year 3, year 4, but even, you know what? Even in 2 years from now, when Mishkov is up and Forrester is up, and then you have to sign all these guys, and then Martone eventually, like that money might start becoming a little, you know, it's like, oh fuck, do we really? So like, look, if somehow, like I don't know if like maybe putting these rumors out there would maybe kind of convince Couturier maybe to possibly move, like to waive his NMC. Maybe that's the goal here.
Mm-hmm. That's the only thing I can think of.
You know, and I'm sure like the Flyers, like if they really are considering buying him out, like I'm sure they would definitely not mind retaining 50%, like you said. Like, come on. So, you know, so honestly, if you could figure that out, I think that's the better route. Definitely.
It just makes more sense. And it gives them an opportunity to play for a team that they're not going to screw the guy over. He's been here forever. No. So they'll give him a team that is actually at least respectable. They're not going to put him on a tanking team right now, like a Calgary or St. Louis or a Rangers or something like that. They'll give him a team that he can look at and say, yeah, this team's competitive. I'll at least get a chance to play in the playoffs. That's why the Kings make sense to me. Get Panarin. They'll be healthy next year. They'll get Fiala back. Like, it just makes sense for a team like that. But anyway, all right, let's move on to our next topic. Playoffs. Don't talk about playoffs. We're talking about playoffs. Because right now, as we stand today, this team's only 4 points out of a playoff spot after we thought this season was over. So, looking at the playoff picture right now, we'll go over each. It's realistically, I'd say it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 9 teams fighting for 5 spots. Carolina, Buffalo, and Tampa. I'm going to check mark those 3 teams as in. Tampa to a lesser degree, but I don't see them falling out. They'd have to go on a pretty massive slump. I doubt it. So, you have in the Metropolitan Division, Pittsburgh, 69 games played, 35, 18, and 16. The Kings of the OTL. They are currently the 2nd spot in the Metro. Then 3rd spot, Columbus Blue Jackets, man. We talk about the Buffalo Sabres. This Columbus team, 18-2-4 in their last 24 games since Rick Bowness took over. 37-21-11. They're at 85 points. Currently, the 3 spot in the Metro have a 2-point edge on the first team out. As we record this, Columbus has a massive game against the Islanders today. We're rooting for not overtime in that game. Go regulation. In the Atlantic, Buffalo and Tampa, as mentioned, are in. The Montreal Canadiens currently hold a 3 spot in the Atlantic. 69 games played, 38-21-10. They're at 86 points. And then we go to the wild card. Bruins picked up a big win against the Detroit Red Wings in regulation last night. They're currently the first wild card, 70 games played, 39-23-8, also 86 points. And then the second wild card team, Detroit Red Wings, who you have 3 games still against. 38-24-8, 84 points, 70 games played. However, it doesn't stop there because you still have to jump at least 3 teams is where the complexity of this comes in a little more. New York Islanders, also 70 games played right now, 39-26-5, 83 points. Ottawa Senators, 69 games played, 36-24-9, 81 points. And then your Philadelphia Flyers, 69 games played, 34-23-12. Actual win-loss record, they're only 1 game under 500 right now. You're 9-2-1 in your last 12. You're right in this mix suddenly. Eric, let's hear it. What is your take on the Flyers hot streak, and is there a realistic path for this team to get into the playoffs as we come up to a massive week where you play two of the three teams I mentioned in the next 3 games?
Yeah, look, is there a realistic path? I think there could be. I think there could be. I think last week I said I think I gave them like a 5% chance to make the playoffs.
What's it at?
I'm gonna go maybe 10 now.
Oh, it doubled.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with 10. I still think it's gonna be really tough. Look, Detroit. I think they got to get in the top 3. They got to end up in the division. The way Columbus is playing right now, I think no, they're not catchable. So Carolina, Columbus, let's say those are 1-2 for sure. Let's say, okay. Pittsburgh right now is second in the division, and then you have the Islanders that are out of the playoffs right now, right behind Detroit for the last wild card. But now you have the Senators, who also have been on fire, so they're chasing the wild card.
Last 10.
Yeah. So they're chasing the wild card. I think I mentioned also last week, I think Pittsburgh and Detroit are both vulnerable. So I think Ottawa could probably catch Detroit and maybe make the wild card. So if that's the case, I think the Flyers really, really, really have to get into the division. So now, look, Pittsburgh's 4-3-3 in their last 10. Islanders are 5-5-0 in their last 10, and they've lost 2 in a row. So they're struggling right now. Pittsburgh's next 2 games are against Carolina and Colorado. Now those are 2 tough teams. Okay, and then they play. Actually, let's go 3. Oh wait, hold on. Okay, no, you know what? Here, the next 4 games: Carolina, Colorado, Ottawa, Dallas. Okay, that's Pittsburgh's next.
That's garbage.
That's a tough schedule. Now, our next 4: Columbus, Chicago, Detroit, and Dallas.
Not much easier. Easier, but not much easier.
Easier. But we are playing Dallas, so and so is Pittsburgh. So
yeah.
But we play Detroit, who we're chasing also technically in a wild card space. So
and they've been struggling.
Yeah, they're struggling.
And Chicago at home, who should be winnable.
The winnable game, and Columbus, Columbus is hot. So I think this next 4-game stretch for Pittsburgh and us is gonna be that's gonna be the season right there. I think, or at least to try and seize power, let's say, or seize that spot. Because even the Islanders, the Islanders are struggling too, and they're playing the next 4: Columbus, Chicago, Dallas, and Florida. So theirs is a little easier. Theirs is more or less like ours. So I think these next 4 games are really, really going to be telling. They're really going to be telling. Because, like I said, I think the wild card is a possibility, but I think they got to get in through the division. So could it happen? Look, the way we've been playing, we've been playing better of late. We've been playing better. We are 9-3-1 since the Olympic break. So, but now it's also a bit concerning on our part is 7 of those 13 games have gone into overtime or a shootout. But we've won 6 of those 7. So, we're getting the points. But we're also man, we've played a lot of hockey this year. We have played a lot of fucking hockey. I'm telling you, I am getting my money's worth with the hockey package this year because God knows how much hockey I've watched.
Yeah.
With all these fucking overtime or shootouts. So, is it doable? I think yes. I think it is doable. Will it happen? Okay. After looking at those games, I said 10%. Okay, yeah, no, I think still, you know what? 10%. I want to see how these next 4 games go. I'm really curious to see how it goes. Like I said, 10% is my number right now. What helps also is the Islanders did play an extra game, so that's good. But but we'll see. We'll see. But like I said, these next 4 games are going to be very telling.
I've been waiting to have some fun playoff talk on this channel for a while. It's been a bit. I mean, obviously we had it in 23, 24, a little bit to a lesser degree. Actually, no, we didn't, because I don't think Flyera really was in full steam at that point. I began Flyer at the end of the 23-24 season. So this is the first time Flyer has had in-depth playoff talk to this degree. And it's a fucking mess. So let me go with my opinion. I'm going to start with my percent. You say 10. I'm going to go to 20. I'm going to give them a 20% chance right now. And the reason why I say that is because, yes, we have some tough games going on, but a lot of other teams do at the moment. And I kind of go with this by how these teams are playing at this moment and where they all stand. The team with the toughest, now, you know what's crazy? Out of the 7 toughest remaining schedules right now, 6 of them are teams in this mess right now. The Bruins have the hardest. Columbus is the second hardest. The Isles have the third hardest. And Calgary's fourth. They're the anomaly in this. Pittsburgh is the 5th hardest. We have the 6th hardest, and Ottawa has the 7th hardest. This is the NHL remaining strength of schedule on Tankathon. So I look at some of these common games these teams have. First of all, I'm not counting Boston as a team that I consider as a lock yet. They have 86 points. We have a game in hand in them. We have a game still against them, too. They have games. They have a game against Dallas still. They have a game against Carolina still. A game against Buffalo still. 2 against Tampa. A game against Minnesota, and 2 against Columbus. So there's automatic points will be left out. Columbus, we mentioned how hot they've been, but they have a pretty grueling schedule coming up too. 2 against Carolina, a game against Buffalo, 2 against Montreal. That ain't an easy game. 2 against the Bruins, another game against Detroit, another game today against the Islanders. They also have a game against Washington. I wouldn't count that as really an easy game either. They put that in the easier side, but that's still a semi-challenging game. Let's go to the Islanders now. A game against Dallas, 2 against Carolina, another one against Buffalo, 1 against Montreal, 1 against Pittsburgh, 1 against Carolina. You know, I'd even throw Montreal in the hard schedule. They have the 9th hardest schedule. I'll go over them shortly. Then you have us. We have some challenging games coming up. But a lot of them are just ones, except one team. So you have a game against Dallas. That's going to be a very difficult game. It is a back-to-back. A game against Carolina, but I wonder what Carolina is going to do at this point, because that game against Carolina is the second to last game of the season. And Carolina might be in the playoffs at that point, kind of letting their foot off the throttle, resting some guys. So keep an eye on that. A game against Montreal. Another team that could be in a very similar situation, because that is the Flyers' very last game of the season. Interesting watch there. Game against Columbus, Tuesday, the biggest game of the year, no questions asked. You know, maybe the second biggest, because Detroit on Saturday might be the biggest. Another game against Boston, as I mentioned, on their side. That's also at home. Every one of the teams I mentioned, the one game left against, crazy statistic, they're all at home. All 5 of them are at home. Then Detroit, 2 on the road, 1 at home. Those 3 games against Detroit are going to be the season. Right there. Not saying the other 5 games I mentioned are not important, but they're the season. Easy games for the Flyers. Home against Chicago, coming up this week. They have a game against Winnipeg. I don't know if that's home or the road. I think that's on the road because I don't recall them playing in Winnipeg this year. You can double check that. They got another game against Jersey. Jersey's kind of having its difficulty scoring right now. A lot of their guys have underachieved this year. Very winnable game. Game against Washington, who they're 2-1 against. They played pretty well this year. Even the game that they lost, I didn't think they played all that bad against them. Washington is a team they played well this year. So watch that game as well. So with the Flyers right now, I look at streaks of where these teams are at the moment. So Pittsburgh's 4-3-3 in their last 10, as you mentioned. Columbus is surging. They've won 4 straight. They've got points in each of their last 10. 7-0-3. That is going to be a challenge. The last time you played Columbus, though, you did beat them. I mean, you didn't beat them. I'm sorry. You went to overtime with them. You played them tough. And you didn't play that good of a game either, but you still found a way to get that game to overtime. The way the Flyers are playing right now, I wonder how they're going to answer the bell against them. But mind you, it will be their first game back from a 3-game road trip. And they played better on the road recently against home, which kind of contradicts my 5 games at home point, but still of note. Montreal, kind of 500 hockey lately with them. They're 5-4-1. Not as much of a watch on them as the other teams I'd mentioned. Pittsburgh and Detroit probably being the biggest. Even Boston, I'd watch more on them. Boston, 5-2-3 in their last 10. Points in 8 of 10, but 5-5 as a collective whole. Detroit, 4-4-2 in their last 10. That's a team to watch. You're catching them at the right time, and I don't know if Dylan Larkin is going to be ready for that game against Saturday. Watch that as well. Gibson, I watched that Bruins and Red Wings game last night. He looked shaky. 2 softies he allowed in that game. Watch that too. Vladar, I think the Flyers have the netminder advantage against them, even if they play Gibson. I would take Dan Vladar right now over John Gibson. He has played better than him. So with that being said, this week's massive, as you mentioned, Eric. Well, I'm going to kind of counteract this into next week's games, but I'm going to do this in a big picture. If you ask me these next 4 games, out of a possible 8 points, you need 5 of them. And in that, out of Columbus and Detroit, you have to get a minimum of 3 points in those games. So you got to beat one of them outright. I think preferably in regulation, and you got to get at least a point on the other. If they can win both of those games, that would be even bigger. You got to beat Chicago. I don't expect them to beat Dallas. So this week, there is a lot of teams playing against each other in this mess, which is good. And you know what? That is kind of the good thing about how the NHL has devised their schedule. Even though I've gone against it so much, the later half of the season, it feels like are a lot of interconference games where they do all the outer conference games in the first 2/3 of the season, which is kind of good. It makes those head-to-head games a lot more meaningful. At this moment, this could change very easily this point next week when we do episode 77. But at this moment, I don't think anything is going to be truly determined until the final 2 weeks of the season. But if they go and lose 3 out of 4 here, we're probably backed on their cooked wagon. They have to get 5 of 8 points this week, minimum. I would probably push even closer to 6 of 8, the way these teams are playing. But at the bare minimum, you need 5. In Columbus and Detroit, you've got to get the minimum of 3 points in those games. It gives you a little leeway in the Dallas game, number 1. And number 2, the fact that those are 4-point games, you need to find a way to keep up with these teams. With that being said, they're going to have to continue to get consistent goaltending from Dan Vladar. He's going to get ready. He's probably going to get about 75, 80% of these games. This is where teams rely on their starter to play constantly. Not to say Erson's been bad lately. As much as we've fucking roasted him all season, he has been playing better. And I feel a little more confident in the remaining 13 games to give him 3.
3, yeah.
I think 3 is fair. It sucks, though, because you're playing Detroit and Dallas back-to-back. He's going to have to play one of those games. I'd go, if it's up to me, I'd go Vladar. This is a way you kind of work Urson a little bit to give him 2 out of those 3 games, to give Vladar an extra bit of rest before going balls to the walls the remaining 3 weeks. Vladar gets Columbus. I'd go Urson against Chicago. I feel confident enough in this team that they can beat Chicago with current Sam Ersson and net. It gives Vladar an extra 4 days of rest before that back-to-back. I'd go Vladar against Detroit because that's the bigger game. And as much as I'm expecting them to lose to Dallas, I'd go Ersson against Dallas. You need to prioritize that Detroit game, and you need to prioritize that Columbus game. I give Ersson 2 games this week for that reason, so Vladar can get the extra rest. Because you can't run him back-to-back right now and run him into the ground. You're going to need him for what's coming up next. Because after that, a little bit of a step into next week. Tuesday at 31st, you have at Washington. Vladar's getting that game. Thursday the 2nd, home against Detroit. Vladar is getting that game. Saturday, then I think they play Friday the 3rd against the Isles.
Back to back, that's probably Erskine.
Yeah, you may have to go Erskine again. And then Sunday, home against the Bruins. Vladar's getting that game. Nationally televised against the Bruins too. 3:30 game. This is where you have to put rest as a priority. Vladar needs that. Another thing to mention, if this team is going to make a true push for the playoffs, the power play needs to give you more of the spark. You've emphasized it all year. They have survived this. They can't go 4 for 41 over these next games. You need the minimum, I'm going to say, of 18% minimum over these next few weeks. I'd probably push for 20, realistically. Now, how hopeful am I of that? Not high. I know. This is why I kind of cap it at 20. But 18 minimum. This team's going to have to find some balls. And you know what? I got to give Talking credit one day. Ever since Danny in the office talked to him, Michkov's been getting more minutes. Michkov's starting to find his groove a little bit. Your 3 hottest players right now after this California trip in order, Tippett, Cates, Michkov. Those 3 guys are going to have to continue their strong play. And Zegras and Konechny are going to have to – your big guns need to be big guns. They're going to need consistent scoring from their top end. It really comes down to this. Those head-to-head matchups you have to take advantage of them. You've got a lot against teams that are in the mix right now. You control your destiny to a degree. You have in this mess of teams that you're still playing, 7 of your remaining 13 games against teams that are ahead of you right now in that clump. Montreal, Columbus, Boston, Isles, 3 against Detroit. Out of those 7, you have 14 points on the table. You need 10. You need the minimum of 10 points. That's where it comes down to. That half of games are the most important half of the season. And even though you have a tough schedule, a lot of these teams in the mix have a tough schedule too. So we're kind of looking at this in a big picture perspective. I think the magic number, if you ask me, because all these teams are playing each other, to get in is going to be 98 points. You're at 80 right now. That means your max is 106. That would mean you need 18 out of a possible 26 points. You got to pretty much do what you've been doing. You are 8 points back at the break. You're down. You got it down to 4. You have to go, in my opinion, to get in. I'll say 9-2-2, something like that. I think that's what you're going to need. You can't lose many games in regulation, but they're playing strong right now. They have to keep the momentum. And Columbus has shown you can do that for an extended period of time. I don't know if this team's capable of doing it, but they're going to pretty much have to repeat the run they just went on again over the next 13 games. 9-2-2, 98 points. The teams ahead of them are on a higher pace than that, but I don't think every single one of those teams will keep that pace. There's too many teams that are playing against each other, and some of these teams are currently fading right now. Detroit's without Larkin right now. That's a big blow for them. The Islanders, for whatever reason, brought in some stupid contracts, and I think that team's starting to second-guess themselves. The Isles are a little vulnerable right now. They're 5-5-0 in their last 10. That's a team I haven't talked about enough. You are capable of passing them. They can only ride Sorokin's tail for so long in the ride of the rookie sensation of Matthew Schaefer. You can pass that team. Columbus is going to be tough. Pittsburgh's possible. It comes down to that. If this team can get 18 out of 26 points, they can get in. That's where I stand right now. Eric. We got Jamey back in here. Hold on a second. Let's bring him in. Rick, can you bring in Mr. Bask out for us? Hold on one moment.
Sorry, man.
Not a problem. Don't worry about it. Perfect timing. I'll give you a quick 5 minutes, and then we got to move on to next week's games. We were talking about the current playoff push right now. Jamey, what's your take? What's it going to take for them to get in? What % chance do you give them?
Personally, I think they can only lose 3 games the rest of the way. They're going to need a lot of help. I mean, there's a lot of teams, unfortunately, that are on heaters right now. The Senators are a heater. The Columbus Blue Jackets are a heater. The Islanders, they do this every year. They start to flounder, then out of nowhere, they resurrect. So I expect a push from them. But Detroit is loaded, too. And they're going to start getting healthy players back. So they scare me because we still have 3 against Detroit. So Tuesday, first things first.
Hold on one sec, Jamey. I'm going to bring up the NHL strength of schedule meter. I'm going to share that screen real quick. Rick, can you swap it to the 3-man slot real quick? And I'm going to share this real quick with everyone. I think it would be a little bit easier so we can look at this at a big picture perspective. Hold on one second.
Okay.
Hold on. All right. Hold on. Let Rick fix that real quick. So you can kind of see the toughest schedules looking at this the rest of the way. This is what I was pointing out with Eric before you hop back in here. Yeah. These are the remaining teams that everyone has in terms of toughest and easiest opponents. We have the 6th toughest schedule, but as you can see, a lot of these teams, in fact, 8 out of 10 of the teams that we have been talking about in this mix are all in that tough schedule mix. Detroit has tough games left. Montreal has tough games left. Ottawa, us, every one of these teams has a very difficult schedule, in my opinion, the rest of the way. A lot of these teams play each other. Sorry to interrupt, Jay. Continue your point. But that's why I had them at kind of 9-2-2 before you entered here. But looking at this, Jamey, what is your point on this? Continue your point on this.
Yeah, I just think that Detroit, I think, has one of the easiest schedules out of all the teams, right, with the easiest schedules left remaining, except for 3 against the Flyers, of course. But so they sort of control their own destiny. But let's be honest here. If the Flyers lose Tuesday to Columbus, let's say in regulation, I think it's going to be even more daunting. You know, that's the game right there that you don't want to lose. I'd rather, if that were going to happen, I'd rather lose against the San Jose Sharks, for instance, as opposed to Columbus Blue Jackets. Not only do you lose 2 points in the, in terms of wild card, but you're losing 2 points in terms of the standings for the Metro Division, because the Flyers still logistically have a shot at that third, place in the Metro Division, which I think might turn out to be a little easier to achieve as opposed to going down the wild card route.
Yeah, there's multiple routes. That's the good thing about this. Detroit, you're 4 points back of the wild card route. You're 5 points back of the division route. But the Pittsburgh's vulnerable, as we've mentioned. I'll get out of the share screen real quick. Pittsburgh is vulnerable. They're losing a lot of games in overtime right now to kind of keep them up. But they're a 500 team right now, pretty much, just like you. So the most vulnerable teams in order, I think, are Pittsburgh, Detroit, Isles, and Boston, probably 1 to 4 in that order. So those are the key 4 teams I think you got to watch. I think Montreal and Columbus to a lesser degree. Montreal's got a lot of offensive talent. It's going to be tough for them to fade. I know that goaltending is spotty, although Fowler is up right now for them. Columbus has been on the bender, as we talked about, 18-2-4 in their last 24. Bowness has gotten that team rejuvenated.
Yeah.
That team's huge. What I mentioned before you hopped on, Jamey, out of the Columbus and Detroit games, in my opinion, you have to get a minimum of 3 out of 4 points.
Oh, no question.
No question. Eric, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think that's about it.
All right. Jamey, any final thoughts before we move on to next week's games?
No, I'm good. It's just that it's a tall task for the Flyers, but at least they're playing meaningful games right now.
Last question on that, Jamey, before we move on to the next week's games. What % chance do you give them of getting in?
9.
9. Eric was 10. You're 9. I know it's 20. I'm a little bit higher.
And I'm giving them 9 because of Dan Vladar, to be honest with you.
All right. So let's move on to next week's games. The biggest week of the season. No question about it. I don't think I'm going to do Dallas yet because we'll probably be recording next Sunday. So I'll move that one to next week's games or the week after's games. as we record this, following opponents. So you know what? I will do Dallas because we're going to probably release next week's episode on Monday anyway. So we'll include Dallas. So 4 games. Tuesday, home against Columbus, who's on a heater, as we've mentioned plenty of times.
Yeah.
Thursday, home against Chicago. Very winnable game. Teams kind of sucks. Saturday, at Detroit. Massive game, just as massive as Columbus. Nationally televised, 8 p.m., ABC. Whole world's watching you. Sunday, home against Dallas. Jamey, let me start with you. What's the record this week?
1-3.
Ah! He's waving the white flag.
Yeah, I did that. I think they're going to lose. I have them losing Tuesday to Columbus. That may go into overtime. So I'll go 1-2-1. How's that? That may go into overtime for a shootout. But I have them beating the Blackhawks. I think that'll be a makeup game and them just slaughter the Blackhawks. Something like 4 or 5-0, I think. And then, go against Detroit. Let's be honest. If that was at home, I'd feel better. I would say it'd be a victory. They just don't play well in Detroit for whatever reason. That's a tough barn to play in for them. They struggle in San Jose too. And look, they came out with a victory, but against San Jose in San Jose. But it is what it is. And I had them losing to Dallas. Dallas is starting to find their footing again. I just think that they lost to them earlier in the year. They're just, I don't know. Dallas is a very good team.
Yeah. Fair enough. 1-2-1. That's so 3 points. Eric, how about you?
Oh man. Okay, you know what? Let's go through. Screw it. Optimistic. Let's go 3-1.
Nice.
I think
There you go.
Yeah, I think they beat Columbus, they beat Chicago, they beat Detroit, but they're gonna lose to Dallas.
So we're gonna be on a 6-game win streak.
Yeah, I think their first. I think even if they win against Columbus, I think it's gonna be the first 4-game win streak of the season, and I think even in the last couple of years or something. I have to look that
they
up.
haven't been on one, I think, since 23-24.
Yeah, something like that. They're like, so yeah. So you know what? Screw it. I'm doing it. 3-1. Let's
There
keep the
you
good
go.
times rolling. Let's do it.
Martino out here.
I said they needed 5 of 8 points minimum to keep this in next week. That's exactly what I'm giving them. 5 out of 8. 2-1 in 1 week.
Wow.
They get their revenge on Columbus. They're going to beat them. And I'm going to make a bold statement. They beat them in regulation and shock a lot of people. Then they lose in overtime to Chicago and piss us off. A game they should win, a game they have no reason of losing. We're on a high horse, and they lay an egg against Chicago and lose that game in overtime. They go into Detroit, and they win again. They win that game. They come up for it, but they win in overtime. So Detroit does eke a point out of it. So I'll say 4-2 win against Columbus, 3-2 loss in overtime to Chicago, 4-3 win in overtime against Detroit, and then they get steamrolled by Dallas out of fatigue. I'll have them losing that game 5-1. So 2-1 in 1 week, and I think I'll make the bold prediction they will only be 3 points back out of a playoff spot next week when we do this show. I think there's hope. I think there's a chance, but they have to keep playing the hockey that they've been playing. I said 9-2-2 would have to be their record the rest of the way to get in because teams play against each other, and I don't think everyone's going to keep that pace. But you have teams to hop over. 1 or 2 of these teams are going to falter a little bit, and they play against each other, as I mentioned. So we'll see what happens.
You guys are very optimistic. I give kudos to you. Usually I'm more optimistic as opposed to pessimistic. So
You know what?
the
I'm
times
going to give them a fighting chance. They've earned that to me. They've earned that.
And I agree. And I'll say this. I think, kudos to Rick Tocchet for keeping the team together too. I got to give him kudos for that. You know what I mean? We don't always have to like everything he does, but when he does stuff well, I want to try to, give him some praise. Kudos for him to keeping the team together.
All right. With that being said, that is going to wrap things up of Flyera Gonna Flyera. Any final thoughts before we wrap things up? I apologize.
Go Flyers. That's my final thought.
Love it.
Yeah. Just to hit on your point just a little bit, Alex, I think they're going to be closer than 3 points. I think Pittsburgh shits the bed this week.
Wow. There you go. Bold statement.
Yes. I'm going back on the Pittsburgh's going to miss the playoff train.
That's what I'm saying. This
all
week,
year, I'm sticking with it.
That's what I'm saying. This week is very important. This week is very important for the race.
Gentlemen, how about a live stream Saturday? Eric already told me a maybe, depending on his daughter's schedule. Jamey, you up for a live stream Saturday night for the game against Detroit?
I could, but Kelly and I have a wedding in Lancaster. It's one of her old coaches. Used to be her
Understandable. Don't worry about it. So we'll see. We may or may not be doing a live stream Saturday for the game against Detroit, ladies and gentlemen. So potentially keep an eye on that. But that's going to do it for this week's episode of Flyer Gonna Flyer. A long one, a good one. We got into a lot. We had fun with this one. We look forward to seeing you next week. And as always, ladies and gentlemen, let's go Flyers.